Carl Higbie on NewsMax. Now, NewsMax is one of those places I like to get a lot of my news from. They're not like huge, so they don't lie as much. I have a hard time trusting any news outlet at all. So I typically get my news from multiple sources. I usually use like CNN and then also Newsmax, Breitbart, sometimes Fox News. They get annoying sometimes, though. I am conservative, but I like to get a lot of news from left leaning sources strictly because it's hilarious to me whenever they lie, and they lie a lot. I don't trust them. And I think it's super dumb that they have this mindset of you must trust the news simply because it's the news, whenever it's on them to make us trust them. They have the burden. It's just like the government. I don't trust the government. I think, of course, the left is just there. And even the conservatives, a lot of them, I do find truth in a lot of what they're saying. Don't get me wrong, but I don't live in an echo chamber. I refuse to. There is certain things that even on the right, I'm like, I see it in a different way, which is fine. And I think that that helps grow you. Charlie Kirk, a lot of stuff that he says, I believe, but there are some things that I don't. Um, but he does say something. He says that if if we stop talking to people that we don't agree with, if we put ourselves in an echo chamber, and if we stop having any kind of conversations with people that we don't believe in, just to find some kind of middle ground or just to learn, then society breaks. My best friend, my one black friend, he does he's I would almost say he's old school liberal. I think I've said this before, but I do like to talk to him because he's like, I believe this, and I'm like, oh well, that's a good point. I didn't see it from that angle, but ultimately, you have to stand on your own morals too. All that to say, Carl Higbie, fantastic guy, true patriot. He's a former SEAL, and he has this to say about um, government cover-ups, especially when it pertains to the JFK assassination from the documents leaked earlier this week. I'm a little tardy to the party as far as this goes. Whenever it first dropped, I did start reading through, but I just couldn't get through the 3,000 pages. Carl Higbie really sums it up a lot, and a lot of stuff that he does talk about really is like, yeah, that's exactly how I see it and exactly how I would want to say it. So yeah, let's just dive into it.
Well, I have spent the better part of last night and today at the very bottom of the rabbit hole on these JFK files. And what do you know? I mean, not too much new, but literally what everyone already knew, which the government, entrenched bureaucrats, and overeducated institutionalists called us conspiracy theorists for. Turns out to be true. And if you think it's crazy, look
He's
no
not
further
wrong.
than Chuck Schumer. He basically said the quiet part out loud when Trump was pushing the same buttons Kennedy was years ago.
To take on the
So if you don't know, but if you don't know, years ago, Kennedy got rid of this part of the government that the USAID ended up forming out of, because he found a lot of corruption in it. I can't remember what it was called. I had to look it up, but it was basically the predecessor of USAID. And he found a bunch of corruption in it, so he shut the crap down. And it was Johnson who brought USAID back or up, and that was kind of a crux for the assassination. I'm sure that Carl gets into that, but I wanted to kind of put that out there.
intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
And I'm going to prove him right, because much of what was released we already knew. But to illustrate exactly why I don't trust the government, we're going to put it all in one place for you, with the old and the new info, because it's pretty crazy how so many things are connected. Let's take a walk down that
He's not
path,
wrong.
shall we? You ever heard of a guy named Gary Underhill? He was a former World War II military intel guy who then went on to work for the CIA, working for projects such as special assignments that were classified. Well, in 1964, the Warren Commission determined that Lee Harvey Oswald assassinated Kennedy and acted alone. Shortly after,
What's crazy is the Warren Commission, when Johnson made the Warren Commission, he did it through, again, I'm horrible with names, but he did it with the dude who Kennedy fired basically because of corruption. And then Johnson brought that guy in to do the Warren Commission. So you had this dude who was corrupt, got fired by the president. The president gets assassinated. The incoming president hires that same dude back. You think he's going to be truthful? Come on.
after Mr. Underhill traveled from D.C. to New Jersey to confide in some friends, and according to newly unredacted report, what he said to those friends was, quote, he attributed the Kennedy murder to a CIA clique which was carrying on a lucrative racket in gun running, narcotics, and other contraband, and manipulating political intrigue to serve its own ends. Kennedy supposedly got wind that something was going on and was killed before he could blow the whistle.
Ooh. So this, oh, where is it? Where's that picture of that dude goober at? This goober dude right here, he told his friends that, hey, there's some shady shit going on, and Kennedy knew it.
Jersey to confide in some friends, and according to newly unredacted report, what he said to those friends was, quote, he attributed the Kennedy murder to a CIA clique which was carrying on a lucrative racket in gun running, narcotics, and other contraband, and manipulating political intrigue.
So the CIA was carrying a lucrative racket in gun running. So the CIA was doing some mafia shit. Kennedy found out, and then he was killed. Interesting.
To serve its own ends. Kennedy supposedly got wind that something was going on and was killed before he could blow the whistle on it. And wouldn't you know, 6 months later, Mr. Underhill was found dead, alone, and had allegedly shot himself in the left side of his head, even though he was right-handed.
Let me repeat that for you in the back.
Mr. Underhill was found dead, alone, and had allegedly shot himself in the left side of his head, even though he was right-handed.
So you people that are very confused, like CNN, dude was right-handed, but he committed suicide by shooting himself in the left side of the head. I mean, maybe, or maybe somebody shot him. Epstein didn't kill himself. Wait. Oh, here we go. The problem remains, however, that Justice and FBI officials don't believe the new documents set to release. This is about the Epstein. Getting bombshells. Officials expect that even after release the latest documents, people who believe there are secrets being covered up will likely continue to believe, and there is a cover-up, much like how cottage industry of conspiracies have continued to flourish over JFK. Experts said that the JFK records didn't contain new information to support conspiracies about who killed the president. Tom Smaluk, who was the deputy director of Assassinations Record Review Board, told CNN that from what he reviewed, there isn't anything to change the current conclusion of Kennedy's assassination. That a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, was responsible for his death. So, trust the institutions. We're just getting into Carl's findings here. And already we have Kennedy got wind of the CIA Breaking Bad as a mafia group running guns and drugs. And before he could do anything about it, he was killed, coincidentally. Also, that Underhill went to his friends and told them, which was all in this new information that just got released. And then a month later, he was found dead, shot on the left side of his head, even though he was right-handed. Yes, people can shoot themselves on the left side, even if they're right-handed. However, why the fuck would you do that? If you're right-handed, shoot yourself on the right side. But if you're only looking at CNN or the mainstream media, who really did not talk any about this at all, even now, you will see this. And that is the only thing as of today, actually as of yesterday, that I have found scrolling through CNN that mentions this Kennedy drop, which is they are telling you that it is all conspiracy unless you believe in the official narrative that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman responsible for his death. Now, here's the thing that they're trying to do, though. Though that could be correct, that he was a lone gunman and it was Lee Harvey Oswald, what is the lore? What's the bigger picture around that? Let's see what Carl has to say on it.
It was ruled a suicide. Now, in my experience on this earth, people who have come forward with information that incriminates big people or organizations that end up dead, I mean, do you really believe they killed themselves? Like
Nope.
Jeffrey Epstein? Don't worry, I'll get to that in a sec. Now,
Okay,
lots
he's
of
gonna get into that.
factors raise eyebrows, but did you know that JFK's car route was also changed at the last minute? By who? The mayor, Earl Cabell, who was, at the time of the shooting, a current CIA asset, and his brother, Charles, had been a senior member at the CIA that had been forced to retire from the agency the year before.
So it sounds like the CIA is all over
Why does
this.
this matter? Oh, this goes on to why the CIA would have it out for JFK as well. You ever heard of an agency called the ICA, the International Cooperation Administration?
This is what I was talking about earlier.
Why?
This is what I was talking about earlier.
They were the agency that was disbanded after the Bay of JFK's car route.
That's the agency I was talking about earlier, that USAID was a predecessor to USAID, was what he was just saying.
Was also changed at the last minute. By who? The mayor. Why does this matter? Oh, this goes on to why the CIA would have it out for JFK as well. You ever heard of an agency called the ICA, the International Cooperation Administration?
This is the company, the branch, the agency I was talking about earlier. That was a predecessor to the USAID.
Probably not. Why? Because they were disbanded. They were the agency that was disbanded after the Bay of Pigs disaster in April of 1961. Mentioned this before, where under JFK, the U.S. tried to invade Cuba during the Cold War using humanitarian and foreign aid as a front to gather intel for that invasion. That bad.
Where have we seen that before? This is not new. It might have been new then. This is not new now. I'm a big believer that history repeats itself. If you don't learn from it, you're doomed to repeat it. And just like the government, the reason why I have a lot of trust issues, especially when it comes to media and the government, this is straight out of their playbook. There was a little campaign in the 90s in a place called Somalia, in a place called Mogadishu. People might know the story from a little film called Black Hawk Down. Now, they use humanitarian agencies as a shield for the Delta Force and Rangers to go in, kind of. So the UN was being attacked by the baddies, and then the US used the humanitarian as a shield for us to go in and help. And then the Black Hawk Down Battle of Mogadishu took place, and then we pulled out because, and the whole thing was just a freaking disaster. Some Delta Force and Rangers were killed, and Clinton just pulled it out, and they just, we never should have went. Period. It was a UN deal. That place, I understand there are innocent people there. However, that place, we should never have put boots on the ground. It's nice to help people, but when the majority absolutely hates the US and we have nothing to gain out of it, what is the point? Anyway.
Intel that was gathered landed assets in a swamp, compounded with the fact that Kennedy denied air support that doomed the entire operation. That tension between the intel community and JFK was only made worse when Kennedy famously said this failure that would, quote, he would splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. And 5 months later, he closed that agency, the ICA, which was seen as an attempt to hamper unaccountable covert.
What's crazy is Kennedy was a Democrat, right? And he wanted to dismember, he actually did dismember that agency, but he also wanted to dismember the CIA because they were corrupt. I think that if Kennedy was here today, he would be viewed definitely by the media and everything as a right-wing extremist. It's crazy how far off the ledge the Democrats have gone in the last 50 years. Not even, but it's nuts. I mean, he was a Democrat, 100%. But he would be definitely a moderate to just a right wing, right side, because he smelled corruption and he was like, let's get this shit out of here.
Operations. Guess what agency he started in its place? A little known agency that was supposed to be more accountable to the State Department. That agency was called
USAID.
You see, prior to this, multiple agencies were using foreign assistance under their own agency cover to cover up their operations. The State Department, the CIA, and tons of others, many using the ICA as cover while competing to see who could out-intel each other, often with massive overlaps, and there were tons of turf wars within our own agencies. USAID
still happening
was
today.
To be the answer to stream all the accountability on that through the State Department. It really had absolutely nothing to do with building wells in Africa. Trust me, it was a cover. Okay, as a SEAL, I was in countries that we weren't at war with for humanitarian purposes too. Okay, I know this. Which gets me to the convenience of Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, the reasoning of Oswald being the lone actor was that he had met with Cuban officials in Mexico City before, and this whole assassination then happened. The official reports allege that it was carried out as retaliation related to the Bay of Pigs. But was it? We know that LBJ and Kennedy had beef, which led to a variety of other theories.
So Oswald was a Marine, but now I'm not 100% fluent on the history of Oswald. I know he had stuff to do with the Russians. He married a Russian. He had something to do with Mexico and Cuba and stuff like that. But I don't think I've ever remember him talking or mentioning the Bay of Pigs. I could be wrong on that, though. But it's funny that they're trying to put that on him now.
Including allegations that LBJ was in on it, with people citing multiple reports what appeared to be LBJ ducking prior to the first shot even being fired. And one of the first things LBJ did as the president after the assassination, which raised even more concern, was to establish that Warren Commission I mentioned earlier to investigate it. And who led that? A little guy named Alan Dulles. Now, Alan Dulles had been the former CIA director that JFK had fired.
That's what I was talking about earlier.
180s, like the reversal on Vietnam, where Kennedy's intent.
I couldn't remember his name, and I couldn't remember his title, but I knew it was some kind of like a corruption thing. I knew Kennedy fired him, and then he's right here.
That JFK had fired.
He was the CIA director.
Also, significant policy 180s, like the reversal on Vietnam, where Kennedy's intent was to withdraw from Vietnam, and then LBJ, when he took over, accelerated the war.
Democrats are warmongers.
All of this is not new. And
you look anywhere in the past, you'll see that.
But what we're finding out from these recent docs last night is that the CIA had one request. They had no oppositions to releasing most of this stuff years ago, but they did have one request for redactions. Any mention of Israel.
My name is Tom Holman. I'm the former ICE director.
Sorry, I don't have YouTube Premium, so
ask America to wake up. You can protect
ads. Let's get back. Let's go back just a little bit. We can see what he was saying.
Years ago, but they did have one request for redactions.
So the CIA had basically, what he was saying is the CIA had one request for continued redactions on this release drop that just happened, and this is what it was.
Any mention of Israel or Israeli intelligence.
Which is really weird.
What were they doing? Were they involved in this? In fact, over a dozen incidences cited in the recent documents we got last night said that it was redacted from previously released documents. I don't have the answer to this, and these documents don't tell us. But
that is really weird.
Is part of the 1% that has been withheld.
So why would the CIA want to make sure that any mentions of Israel stayed redacted? That's kind of fishy. And Carl said he doesn't know either. So, and I'm sure that I'm sure he himself didn't go through all these papers. I'm sure he went through a lot of them, but I'm sure he had his people go through them. And they didn't find anything. Like, why? So that's really curious. I'd like to know as well why the CIA would want to continue the redactions of anything that mentions Israel.
Held all these years, which leads me to my already previous conclusion in general, that is, you can't trust the government for anything.
Rude.
By all accounts released, it appears that our own government assassinated the President of the United States, classified it, and then systematically leaked parts of the files over decades to the public, allowing for theories to be perpetuated for decades.
Let's see what he says about that.
Of them were widely accepted as fact even. This type of campaign, that drip, drip, drip of information, that is a classic psyop that our intel community uses overseas to overthrow governments. Sometimes it's a method to desensitize people to the actual story when it does come out.
That is true.
That often confirms previous theories, and people don't even take it as a new revelation. Here we are.
So he's not wrong, and it's very scary that this is true, because you do this dripping of information layered with a little bit of truth, but you allow these conspiracies to flourish without, like, whenever a conspiracy comes up, you should immediately debunk it. If it is a true conspiracy, you would hope that the government would just put a knife in it and debunk it immediately and set the record straight. But they don't. I can't point to a whole lot of conspiracies that they've done that. 9/11 kind of, but normally whenever it's a snip test, right? So a conspiracy will come out, like the JFK stuff, and then the government will they'll say it's a conspiracy, but they won't give you the truth. They'll give you a little tiddlywink of a truth. And then over 50 years, they just give you little drips of truth. And so the entire populace is desensitized to when the truth inevitably actually comes out. Then they're like, oh, well, they don't care. because it's been in the mindset that everything's a conspiracy, and then the truth nobody just cares about because they're all desensitized to it. So he's not wrong.
A lot of networks aren't even running the story in the first half of their shows. Less than
Again, that's what I said about CNN earlier.
It has come out that the CIA apparently assassinated a president to change policy. So while this drop didn't tell me anything I didn't already suspect, it also conveniently held until anyone was involved was dead, including the fact that the Secret Service agent that it was.
Yeah, like the whole thing with the Epstein files, how they keep teasing with letting that crap out. I don't think they will until the main players are all dead, because once they're dead, you can't really go after them, right? I mean, you can still talk about it, but they won't be around to actually be held accountable for it. We'll see.
Was assigned to JFK that day. The dude who jumped on the hood of that car, he conveniently died a month ago, which did confirm one thing. Question.
Hey guys, I'm John Barklow.
Ads.
Professional survival and
the government. No. I don't.
To be fair, I get what he's saying. He conveniently died and then the stuff was released. But to be fair, dude had to have been pushing 90. I mean, it's not really a quinkydink that he died as a really old freaking, dude. But they did wait until that dude was dead before they released it. So who am I to know?
Care. You don't get to tell me I'm a conspiracy theorist anymore for anything. The onus is now on the government to give me.
It's always been on the government. The onus has always been on the government and the media
about foreign wars,
to
forced vaccinations, currency manipulate, whatever.
Make us believe them.
MO. If you
not the other way around.
Any headline on any matter, you get more questions than answers. I want to know about the Tesla that blew up in front of Trump Tower in Vegas. Why don't we know anything about that?
We don't.
I want to know about Thomas Matthew Crooks, the guy who shot at Trump. I want to know.
We don't know crap.
Roof and the Vegas shooter and Area 51. I want to know. No.
Even worse, we still don't know why that building was never even protected or looked at. It was completely just not even guarded. Like nobody even was over there. And then I think there were some people in the crowd that kind of, hey, there's some dude, climbing up there, and there's like, whatever. So yeah, but we don't know.
Actually, you know what? I deserve to know who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked children to. Was it the people running my government? We're owed those answers. Did he even kill himself?
Nah.
We are owed an answer on the $250 billion missing dollars from the Pentagon budget in the last audit.
What about the Pentagon that was hit on 9/11 and a bunch of money was missing because it conveniently got hit in a part that was under construction, and then all of a sudden, I think it was like $300 million vanished. Still nothing on that one.
I deserve to know what you spent my Social Security contributions on. I demand to know whether or not there's any gold at all in Fort Knox, or how the CIA, via the Pakistani ISI, used Osama bin Laden as an intel asset for years, and then they let him fly planes into the Twin Towers, and then let him live in Pakistan 500 yards from their equivalent of a West Point when we killed him. Given my personal sacrifice in Iraq, I deserve to see the evidence of WMDs that we allegedly went to war for, that spent trillions of dollars and killed thousands of American troops.
Never seen them.
Why they tried to force us to get vaccinated. Why so many of them affiliated with making the decisions about COVID didn't practice any of the precautions that they mandated on us.
People want to get mad about Musk not being elected and leading the charge on Doge and stuff like that, but he brought up a good point about the COVID thing. I mean, Fauci, he was not elected, and he was like the voice of everything, every restriction, every mandate of the vaccine and lockdowns and crap like that. And he would say one thing, and then a day later he would change it, and then a day later he would change it. And I understand that science evolves, but the same dude that said you can get AIDS from like air, like it just floats around. And that's not a lie. That he did say that like back in the 80s. Dude's just
I
retarded.
want to know everything. And I have the right to ask or demand because this government works for us and they've forgotten that. Our
True.
government is supposed to be of, by, and for the people. These files that came out don't allow you to laugh at me or dismiss me on any question I have ever again. The government now has to
Getting
prove
heated.
to me why we should trust them. And if you work for the government, if you're one of these bureaucrats like shrugging your shoulders, if you don't care, may I remind you that's why Trump won. Because you guys betrayed that trust. You've done it a million times. The JFK files are just the latest example. That is why America doesn't trust the government. And what's the worst part about this is that Trump is the first guy in a long time that is making an effort to earn that trust back. And they're trying to kill him for it.
So that's true. And that was a good deal, Carl. Good job. But that's true. The only thing I would say about CNN is just a piece of junk. Like I said, I like to watch a lot of or read a lot of CNN. I can't stand to watch them. They're just I can't. They're the voices and the people they have is just so stupid. But like I like to read it because it's so obviously just retarded and fake and stupid. But you can really pick out like the transgender mice versus transgenetic mice. CNN said it was the transgenetic mice and that Trump was wrong when he said transgender mice. And then a day later, they had to do a redaction because Trump showed them the receipts and proved to them that they're retarded. So I thought that was kind of fun. But this isn't, I mean, Carl's right. You know, the government, the onus is on them to make us want to trust them, not the other way around. We don't trust them blindly. That's how you become a slave in the ways of the government. That's how it's a cult. That's the cult mentality. Trust us without question. We demand that, and that's how the Democrats really try to push it. And that's how like CNN, MSNBC, and everything. You listen to anything they say, anything Trump says, they're immediately on there like, "Oh no, you have to trust us 100%. You're wrong," and that's really a cult mentality. I don't trust anybody. That's how I kind of live it, especially when it comes to like the government and stuff. Because this isn't new. I mean, you go back through the Freedom of Information Act. Actually, I can pull it up right here. I don't want to go like too deep into it right now, simply because this video is already pretty long. But if you go back to like the Freedom of Information Act, for instance, you'll find previously classified stuff that's become declassified. And this is all on World War II. It's all on FDR's basically setting up Pearl Harbor and knowing that it was going to happen because in the political campaign of 1940, FDR, running for a third term, campaigned primarily on the platform of peace. He wanted to be in this war. America wanted to be in peace. They didn't want anything to do with it. Again and again, Roosevelt told the American people that there would be no war. But while making these public promises, Roosevelt was doing everything he could to involve the U.S. in war with Germany. There are some who thought that Roosevelt wanted war in order to cover up failure of his New Deal, that he was at heart a tyrant and wanted power and glory, which would be his as a wartime president. But be that as it may, Roosevelt got the war he wanted by goading Japan into doing what he had been unable to prod Germany into. Against professional military advice, Roosevelt moved our weak Pacific fleet from the West Coast out to Hawaii and based it at Pearl Harbor, which is landlocked and quite vulnerable to air attack. He deliberately set Pearl Harbor up as a sitting duck to invite a Japanese attack. Roosevelt knew that after we had pushed Japan as far as she would go. She would strike at us, and the only logical target for her would be Pearl Harbor. She certainly wouldn't risk bringing the power of the U.S. against her by spearheading an attack on some outlying garrison like Guam, which would merely enrage the American people, but would not seriously damage American strength. So American Ambassador Joseph Grew in Tokyo reported to the State Department the rumor in high diplomatic circles in Tokyo from Japanese sources held that the event of serious trouble between the U.S. and Japan, the Japanese intended to make a surprise attack against Pearl Harbor. As early as the 40s, United States experts had broken Japan's highest security code, the so-called Purple Code, which had even devised a machine called the Magic for ciphering Japanese coded radio messages. So FDR set up Pearl Harbor and then goaded the Japanese to attack it because he wanted to be a wartime president. Not only that, he wanted to go to war with Germany, and Germany wouldn't, go to war. So it's really, really dumb to think that our government has our best interests at heart. It's really stupid to trust your government fully. There's some things that you can, but there's a lot of things you can't because you don't know what they're doing. For instance, how are you going to go in as a congressperson with a salary of 150,000 ish a year and then come out as a multi-millionaire? That doesn't happen without corruption. That doesn't happen without some kind of something. It's on the left and the right. It's not just the left doing it. The right is guilty of that as well. So, no, Higbie, he's great. He's one of my favorite on NewsMax. So I'm sure that we'll look at some more of his stuff down the road. That's about it. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, leave me some comments. See you next time.